Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video, as we've made it to the end of another Tory year, hopefully the last ever, I'd like to run through what 2023 has done for the major areas of politics in the UK, at least in terms of perceptions. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So, yes, this is the last day of the last year of Tory. So let's break this down into major topic areas, shall we? The economy, Brexit, healthcare, immigration, housing and party politicking. So the economy first. Sunak began the year by making 5 pledges, and 3 of those were related to the economy. The first was halving inflation, which sounded like an easy win for the Tories, but was actually a bit of a lose-lose situation. If inflation had not halved, then that was an obvious loss. That would have been really bad. But even if it happened, sort of, Sunak was still not going to claim a win, because I said throughout the year that what people care about is how the economy impacts their own standard of living. Like if you show people, oh, look, this graph looks very good, doesn't it? It says, yeah, but I'm poorer. They don't care about the graph. They care about their own living standards. So would halving inflation make people feel better off? No, worse off still. Just not as bad as it could be in this alternate universe where inflation didn't halve. It would lead to Sunak and the Tories hailing this great achievement, but ordinary voters going, why are the government crowing when we're still poorer? The polling situation is that the latest polling indicates that 71% of voters think that the government is handling the economy badly. Now, this is better than under Liz Truss, admittedly, but it is still election losing territory. Even 55% of 2019 Conservative voters think the government are handling the economy badly. Considering that the Conservatives do not need to lose half of their 2019 voters or anywhere near, I mean 10% will do it. Even if this level falls in 2024, it's going to mean more than enough Conservative voters will think their party is bad with the economy. And if that impacts their vote, then that is the Tories done with. So the economy, the top issue for most voters, and second top issue at the moment for Conservative voters, is not looking good for Rishi Sunak. Then there's Brexit. Now, really, Sunak actually left us in a better place in 2023 with regards to Brexit issues. The Windsor framework put to bed the risk of a trade war and brought us back in line with our international agreements. We rejoined Horizon. All but scrapped the requirements for the UK CA mark nonsense. We're going to allow kids from the continent to actually make school trips to the UK with their identity cards rather than full passports. Basically, the hard Brexit is dead. The ideological Brexit is making way for pragmatic Brexit. As I discussed yesterday, this wasn't done because Rishi Sunak is a pragmatic Brexiteer, but because his MPs want this more practical approach. The most recent YouGov survey from the end of November of this year has 61% of people thinking Brexit has gone badly, with only 12% thinking it's going well. Even of Conservative voters, it's like 25% think it's going well to 37% badly. In terms of how the government specifically is handling Brexit, at the start of 2023, 59% of people thought the government was handling it badly. As of right now, it's 69%. So despite some positive moves, because people don't see the benefits themselves, the public is just becoming more and more infuriated with Brexit. Because ultimately, although I say Sunak has left us in a better position Brexit-wise at the end of this year, thinking about what he's done, he's basically stopped things getting worse. The Windsor framework isn't something that makes things better. It just prevents a trade war, right? Which would make things way worse. The point of joining Horizon is the damage has still been done. We just stop carrying on that damage into future years. You know, allowing school trips, cultural trips from the continent. Again, it doesn't make things better. It just stops things getting worse. All of these things just stop things getting worse. But that means you have to be really deep into the detail to recognise that actually those are improvements. Whereas tangible improvements, nothing like that's happened. And that'll be a lesson for Labour. The public are interested in tangible benefits. So Brexit not going well in 2023 either in terms of perception. In terms of healthcare, this is where we are. The Tories have spent nearly 14 years undermining the NHS, not only with underfunding, which they try to hide by combining private healthcare spending with NHS funding as if it's the same thing. but also by making NHS systems less efficient. They've basically broken the NHS up to the point where it's competing with itself. And in an apparent effort to completely break the NHS before they lose power, the government have been allowing NHS strikes to continue for over a year. I mean, in terms of the polling, the good news for Sunak is that 83% of the public thought the government was handling health badly at the start of the year. Oh, it's loads better now. Absolutely loads better. It's 82% now. So, a bit of a win. Got to take the wins, haven't we? Still going to lose the NHS vote hard, though. 82% of the public thinking you're doing it badly. Yeah, that's not great. And, from this graphic, from the Financial Times, but being used by Labour, this is going to be front and centre, isn't it, next year? This is possibly why, although Sunak included the NHS in his 5 priorities at the start of the year, he dropped healthcare altogether from his recent 5 priorities. Then immigration. Now, usually the Tories' happy place. However, they have failed to understand how the political landscape on immigration has shifted. Being clear, all major political parties are pro-immigration. All of them, Conservatives included, because they all understand that the populist rhetoric is a load of crap. The Tories always talk anti-immigration rhetoric, but that's because they like to blame foreigners for the damage that they're causing. But the Tories are as pro-immigration as anyone. In fact, the proportion of foreign-born citizens in the UK right now is higher since it was when the Tories came to office, So it's higher than it was under Labour as a proportion of the population. In fact, it's higher since Brexit as well. But for a long time, if you wanted to vote for a party that bashed immigration, your choice was the Tories. That was it. Then it became UKIP or the Tories. Now it's Reform UK or the Tories. The Tories basically have competition for the anti-immigration vote, and they can't adapt to the new situation. They just don't know what to do. So what they've done in pursuing the Rwanda scheme and other nonsense is essentially to give oxygen to Reform UK, one of their primary competitors, which is utter madness. And to highlight how this strategy has worked out for Sunak, look at the polling again. At the start of the year, 81% of the public thought the government were handling immigration badly. And now it's 84%. However, it's even worse than that. Because to further emphasise just what a political own goal this has been for the Tories, it's actually an area completely in contradiction to every other poll, where Conservative voters think the Tories are making a bigger mess of things than the general public. Generally, you look at these polls, and there'll be links to all of them in the description below, and you look at the general public think, oh, X% of people think the Tory government's doing this badly. But if you break it down, you look at Conservative voters, and this is 2019 Conservative voters, it's a smaller proportion that think it's been done badly, because they're more favourable towards the Tories. This is one area where, no, the Tories are even harsher than the general public. 84% of the public think the Tories are handling it badly. 87% of Conservative voters think so. Spectacular mess, from which Sunak has little hope of recovery. He's now put all his eggs into the Rwanda plan basket, which again seems like another lose-lose to me. As for housing, another fine mess. In theory, the Tories lean heavily on elderly voters who own their own homes outright. So messing up housing policy can actually work in their favour with these voters. But although these voters are super important to them, there's not enough of them to win the election. For mortgage holders, the rise in interest rates coinciding with a general increase in the cost of living and government calls for wages to be suppressed meant a lot of voters coming to the end of their fixed rate term and being handed new deals which added sometimes hundreds of pounds a month to the payments. The average figure is £1,800 extra a year, but this figure is way higher in the blue wall. For those renting, rents have gone up by even more as landlords with mortgages had to react, and then landlords without mortgages whacked up the rents anyway just because. They had the opportunity to do so. And for those renting but trying to get onto the housing ladder, the continual failure to impose housing targets means we simply don't have the supply. This is also reflected in the polling. At the start of the year, 68% of the public thought the government were doing badly on housing. Now it's 72%. Essentially, you go over the most important policy areas, which includes all of the policy areas the Tories think are important. I'm not just cherry picking the ones I think are most important. These are the ones that the Tories themselves are focusing on. And the story of 2023 is one of starting off with voters think the Tories are making a right mess of all of them, and ending that year with, if anything, more people thinking they're making a right mess of it all. And in terms of the party politicking, I mean, let's be honest, Labour have made some missteps, that's fair to say, but the Tories seem to have got basically everything wrong. Like, if you wanted to be charitable, you would say they got one thing right. They had a good strategy for the Uxbridge by-election. It was the only way they were going to win it. It still required Labour to mess up a bit, which they did, but it worked, and they won the seat unexpectedly. Except they managed to turn that win into a loss, such is their general uselessness. Because they won Uxbridge based on ULEZ, which is an issue which wouldn't work now. It only worked at that time because it hadn't been implemented yet, and there was a lot of misunderstandings about it, fueled by the Conservatives. And the Tories thought this is the way to win seats all over the country. So they immediately started railing against 20-mile-an-hour zones and pedestrianisation. They said they were going to make it harder for councils to implement it, and they were going to legislate for this. It was going to be in the King's Speech. And then it took months for someone to tap Rishi Sunak on the shoulder and go, yeah, there's lots of Tory voters really like these schemes. So the Tories were forced into an embarrassing climb down as they dropped the plans for what was already a pretty sketchy King's Speech. So what could have been described as their only party political triumph this year was then turned into a 3-month push to alienate more key voters. In terms of the polls, I can be kind. I'll go with the poll of polls. The Tories started the year in a position where if you put it through the MRP forecast, it would look like they were going to win just 102 seats. A year later, Sunak is sitting pretty on a forecast of 142 seats. So even if this trend continued and it goes, very up and down, the Tories might get themselves up to like 182 seats, if they're lucky. So any suggestion that the Tories can actually turn things around more than a little far-fetched. Like, the only turning around they can hope for is to go from, say, 100 to 200 seats. That's it. The best the Tories can hope for, realistically, is to have an election as bad as the one Labour had in 2019. As for where Sunak is at the start of 2024, I'm going to discuss that in the first video tomorrow, because there are a lot of flashpoints on the calendar which should present very regular points of interest in British politics in the coming year. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.